Imagine you're standing on the slick wooden deck of a steamship in the late 1800s, the air heavy with salt and coal smoke, seagulls screaming overhead as the Gulf of Mexico opens up like a restless gray highway. If you think your eyes would be hunting for Houston's skyline, you're thinking like someone born after the winner was already crowned. Back then, Houston wasn't a titan. It was a rumor, an idea scribbled onto paper, hidden in wet marshland and mosquito haze. If you were a merchant, a sailor, a banker, or a dreamer chasing money, your gaze would be fixed on something else entirely. A thin strip of land, a barrier island, a city that glittered like a jeweled knife at the edge of the sea. Galveston. Not just a port, the front door to Texas. The place where deep water ships could actually breathe. The place where the world arrived in crates and barrels and trunks. Medicine, tools, silk, champagne, machinery, letters stamped with foreign ink. It was the kind of city that didn't just grow. It announced itself. Iron-fronted banks that looked like fortress temples. Victorian mansions that shouted wealth through every carved column. Streets full of tailored coats, polished boots, and confidence. It earned a nickname that wasn't exaggeration, the Wall Street of the South. But here's the secret that makes this story more than a pretty postcard. Galveston's golden age wasn't peaceful. It was a high-stakes duel. Quiet at first, then brutal, between an island queen and a muddy inland hustler that refused to stay small. Because 50 miles inland, Houston was choking on its own beginnings. Picture it, swampy ground that swallowed wagon wheels like quicksand. A winding bayou clogged with fallen timber. Canvas tents and rough cabins clinging to the water's edge. Heat that didn't just sit on your skin, it pressed down like a wet hand. Mosquitoes so thick they felt like weather. And lurking in the background, the dread of yellow fever and sickness that could erase families in a season. Houston didn't look like a future empire. It looked like a terrible investment. And yet, inside that mud was obsession. Because every bale of cotton grown in Texas, every shipment of grain, every head of cattle that could become money had to pass through Galveston. The island controlled the gateway. The island collected the fees. And those fees weren't small. They were the kind of legal toll that feels like a choke chain. Pay up, or your trade dies on the dock. Galveston's wharf power became a private machine. One bottleneck, one set of hands collecting the tax of an entire state's ambition. On the island, fortunes rose like mansions. On the mainland, merchants and builders stared at maps and asked a dangerous question: what if we didn't need them? That's when Houston stopped being a town and became a plan. Not a plan for beauty. Galveston already had that. Houston chose something colder: engineering, industry, relentless infrastructure. The kind of work that doesn't sparkle but changes the world. Houston marketed itself like a promise. This is where the railroads meet the sea. 17 railroads, all converging like metal veins. But there was one brutal problem. There was no real sea access, just Buffalo Bayou. Narrow, muddy, twisting, barely worthy of a serious ship. So Houston tried to do something that sounds insane until you realize what's on the line. They tried to carve an ocean pathway through the land. Decades of lobbying, political battles, private money, public money, dredging through silt and stubborn earth, turning a creek into a channel, turning a pipe dream into a route that could swallow an ocean-going steamer. Galveston laughed. They mocked it in newspapers. The island elite couldn't imagine any sane captain steering a massive ship 50 miles inland through winding, treacherous water, when the island offered polished piers, deep harbor, and high society. Why struggle through mud when you can dock in luxury? And for a while, it looked like Galveston was right, until the Gulf reminded everyone who truly holds power. September 8th, 1900. A day that began hot and strange, the kind of sultry air that makes people move slower and talk less. The tides were behaving wrong. Water was climbing where it shouldn't. But in that era, there were no satellites watching the ocean like a hawk. No real warnings screaming across phones and screens. Just human instincts and human denial. And then the hurricane arrived like a judgment. A storm surge rose, towering, unstoppable, sweeping across the low island as if the sea had decided to reclaim its own. Homes shattered, streets disappeared. A city of wealth turned into floating debris and splintered memories. The aftermath wasn't just destruction, it was a landscape of horror. A wall of wreckage piled high, miles long, filled with broken furniture, shattered beams, and the remains of a world that thought it was untouchable. Thousands died, possibly more than anyone could fully count. Galveston didn't just lose buildings that night, it lost the myth that it was safe forever. And here's what makes the story even more haunting. The people of Galveston fought back with almost unbelievable grit. They built a massive seawall. They raised the elevation of the island itself, pumping in sand, lifting structures on jacks, creating a new foundation like rebuilding a city on a second chance. But markets don't run on courage. Markets run on confidence, and confidence had cracked. Investors, merchants, insurers, they looked at that barrier island and saw a truth that couldn't be argued away. No matter how grand the architecture, an island city is always at the mercy of the Gulf. Suddenly, Houston's biggest weakness, being inland, looked like armor. Then came 1914. After years of dredging and political warfare, the Houston Ship Channel opened to deep water traffic. And when the first large steamers pushed 50 miles inland, something shifted that no seawall could stop. Those ships could bypass the island's fees, bypass its bottleneck, bypass the old power. Cargo went straight to Houston, straight into the arms of railroads ready to fling goods across the continent. The mud town didn't just survive, it won. It rewrote the map. And Galveston? Galveston endured. It didn't vanish. It became something different, a historic jewel with scars, resilience, and echoes of a lost empire. Walk the Strand today, and you can still feel it. Those iron-fronted buildings still standing like witnesses, the seawall still there like a concrete memory of the day the sea demanded payment. Two cities, 50 miles apart. One built on the natural gift of deep water. The other built on stubborn human will, the decision to reshape geography itself. Now I want to ask you, if you were a merchant in the 1890s, would you bet on the glamorous island queen or the muddy hustler carving a future out of the swamp? Tell me in the comments which city you would have backed and why. And if you want more stories like this, where history feels like you're standing inside it, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next lost world we rebuild might be one you've never even heard of.